and welcome back, or just welcome if you're new here. I'm Common Free. My husband and I and our 2 cats moved to Canada 11 months ago, and then we had our baby Elba 4.5 months after we arrived in Canada. In today's video, I'm going to speak about whether or not it is worth shipping things to Canada if you are moving to Canada. This, of course, is purely based off of our experience and having chatted to other people. This is a personal decision that everybody's going to make for themselves. But in this video, I'm going to detail things that went into our decision, and maybe that will be valuable for other people to consider in your decision. So first up, we did ship things. Specifically, we shipped 4 large boxes and 6 boxes of books or book boxes and 3 paintings. We used a company called 7 Seas, and later on in this video, I'm going to detail exactly what it cost us to ship that to Canada, specifically Calgary, Canada. Let me start with the first thing for this video, which is a minor regret regarding our shipping. So we shipped 3 paintings. They look like this. They were pretty pricey to ship because we had to, they're canvas paintings. So we removed them from the frame and we paid for a company to do that and to put them into those roller things. And then because they're a unique size, we paid more for them than we paid for boxes of things. And now that they're here, I again need to pay somebody to put them back onto their frames. So I'm not regretting having the paintings here. I really want them here. They're sentimental to me. What I am regretting is that later we spoke to people who brought their paintings over, and pretty much all of them took them on the plane with them, and that works out a lot cheaper. So the day we flew, we did fly with 2 cats on the plane with us, so that is a bit of a logistical thing to consider, but I don't think it would have been that bad to add a painting or that roller to take on the plane with us, and I think that would have saved us a bit in terms of shipping. Anyway, so that's just a random tip, is if you have paintings, maybe consider taking them on the plane with you as opposed to shipping. But later on in the video, I will show my quote and you'll see what we paid for the paintings. And then add in the cost of removing them from the frame, rolling them up into those containers and then putting them back on a frame. Unless, of course, you have the skill set to do that yourself. Next up, we did not ship a container, nor do I think we ever even considered shipping a container. We didn't even consider really sharing a container with somebody or doing a move cube, which is a part of a container, or anything related to that huge amount of shipping. We just did the boxes. Our main reason for not really even considering using a container is that we did not want to ship furniture. We were not emotionally attached to any of our furniture in South Africa, and we most definitely weren't going to ship any of the electrical appliances, given that what we had read and people we'd spoken to, the electrical things work a little bit differently here. So while you can get an adapter, that wouldn't be a risk that I would be willing to take. Also here, when you rent or buy houses, most of the time the appliances are included, like the fridge, the stove, the dryer, the washing machine. So those large kind of house items, we didn't really consider shipping to Canada. For us, it was only ever the consideration of shipping smaller items. We had no intention to pack up our entire house in South Africa as is and ship it here and then unpack it here. All right, then the decision to ship boxes or not to ship boxes. The ultimate thinking behind that was, do we have things that we cannot get in Canada that either we want for practical reasons or sentimental reasons? And what would the cost be of shipping them here while considering the value that it would bring to our lives to have them here? So to make that decision, I would often read Facebook posts around what other people paid to ship things to Canada and sort of more or less what they took. And then I played around with quotes on the 7 Seas website to see, oh, if we ship this many boxes, more or less, how would that cost? And it's a good thing to play around with quotes, because what I saw when I was doing that is sometimes shipping 5 boxes would be the same as shipping, for example, 3 boxes. So it's good to play around with it a little bit. It is a little bit difficult to kind of guess how many boxes your things would fit into. So you can either go, okay, these are the things I want to ship, sort of measure them out and then look at what it would cost to do that. Or play around with what's your budget for shipping and then see how many boxes can you get and then decide what's going to fit into that. So you can go either way. I just kind of had an idea of things we wanted to ship and I guessed how many boxes they would fit into And then I also considered what is like the maximum that I would be willing to pay to ship things to Canada. My estimate was slightly off by 3 boxes to be specific. So how it works with 7 Seas is they drop off the boxes that you're going to pack your stuff into, as well as like how to tape them and the pen to mark them. And then if you have boxes that you don't use, they have quoted you for that, but then they will remove it from the final price that you. So in our case, I thought that we would use 3 more boxes than we ended up using, and then that was deducted from the total amount that we ended up paying. The other thing you want to consider when you're looking at quotes is that there's a fee you need to pay in Canada, which may not appear on the quote. In our case, we paid $784.90, which was in addition to the quote on 7 Seas. So some countries that might be a larger amount or a smaller amount, and also some places in Canada might be a larger or a smaller amount. I know that the people in Toronto paid slightly less, and our boxes were literally on the same boat. All right, so that's how I made the major decision. Do we ship boxes? How many boxes do we ship? Threshold, this is the max I'm willing to pay. This is more or less the things that I want to take with us. They better fit in those boxes, otherwise they're not going. Now I'm going to get a bit more specific around things that we ended up shipping, and I'll also share things that I shipped that I, in hindsight, wouldn't have shipped, and things that I'm pretty grateful that I shipped. And just an overarching theme is going to be, it was things we can't get in Canada and we really want it, either because it's very practical or it's sentimental to us. So first up, I'm going to discuss a very common one, and that is clothing. Neither my husband nor I, we are not people who are that into fashion. We are into slow fashion and natural clothing. So for us, there was never going to be high-priced items or major fashionable items that we felt the need to ship. South African winter clothes will not work here. So I think it's a bit of a waste to bring it over. You might use it in autumn, but autumn is also so short, and then you go into winter that it would be like a nice to have and not really necessary in my experience. But my mom lived in Switzerland, and I do have winter gear from when my mom was in Switzerland, including some snowboarding. So of course, moving to a country with snow, those are items I felt a good idea to pack. So I packed all of my snowboarding things, helmet, gloves, goggles, my snowsuit. And because I was flying pregnant, so we landed in October, so we were gonna go straight into Canadian winter. But pregnancy meant I was most definitely not going to snowboard in that year. So I didn't need to pack it into my bag. It could come into shipping for the following year, winter. And then in my bag, I packed just 2 warm tops because I did want to use those during winter, but only with the mindset of I'm going to use them until I buy something in Canada and they will be extras. Because pretty much everybody told us, buy your winter coats in Canada. And that worked out for us. Other items of clothing that we packed was summer clothing because we flew into winter. But the only reason we did that was because we had space in boxes, and we pretty much used that clothing to be cushioning for other things that we were shipping. Like, they weren't part of the list of like, I really want this to go to Canada. Like, if they didn't fit in the boxes, I would not have shipped them. But given that we needed some padding around some of the stuff that we did ship, we kind of fitted into the boxes. And then shoes, we did ship our summer shoes, and then we packed our autumn and winter shoes. The reason for that is my husband and I both only wear Vivo barefoot shoes, which are a little bit on the pricey side. And while we can get them in Canada, those are not really items we want to repurchase based off of the price, and they don't take up a lot of space in a box. So they can, again, go next to other things in a box. And I guess this falls under clothing, but I shipped cloth diapers from South Africa. Like I said, flew here pregnant, and I know that the cloth diaper market in South Africa is outstanding, and typically they cost less than cloth diapers here in Canada. And it just felt really nice to have that for our baby from South Africa. That took up nearly an entire box because I shipped a lot of them, and I was rushed there towards the end and not 100% sure exactly which ones I'd want to use. So I did ship like a few different types. I have a whole video on that. And then I ended up only using some of them. And then the downside is I ship diapers that are a South African brand, so they're not easy to sell here on secondhand marketplace because people don't know them. But I mean, that was a kind of lesson that I was willing to incur with our shipping because I wanted cloth diapers here, and I don't think that I would have known that those are the type of diapers that I wouldn't enjoy using. That's not a major regret. I'm just sharing that that was a sort of very unique to me clothing type item that I was adamant that I wanted to ship here. Having now lived in Canada though, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that all pregnant people ship that if you want to use cloth diapers, because I've actually found that the secondhand cloth diaper market here is pretty good. And even if you want to buy them new, there's like a lot of options and they're pretty great. So the cloth diaper market here is really not as bad as what I had been led to believe. A tiny bit of a bummer in terms of that cloth diaper shipping is that our shipping did arrive 2 weeks after baby was born. And on that note, I also shipped, but like a handful of baby items that were gifted to us by family and friends. One of the big tips that I can give when contemplating shipping, do you want that thing in Canada? And then can you go an extended period of time without having that thing in Canada? And that, like when you're packing your shipping, you kind of want to ask yourself that over and over, because the shipping is a bit unpredictable. So when we shipped our stuff, it looked like it would take 100 days to get here. So 100 days is like between 3 to 4 months. But then it ended up taking exactly 5 months. And for other people, their shipping might have taken longer because you need to wait for the boat to fill up before it's going to go. Some examples from my side around this one is a few years ago, many years ago now, my mom bought me stainless steel pots that are of a really high quality. Of course, I can get stainless steel pots in any country, but I figured given that we were shipping stuff, that's a nice thing to ship. That was a set of 3 pots, and I knew that we would want more than 3 pots, so I knew that moving here, we would buy, say, 1 or 2 more pots that we would use until our shipping came. And that worked well for us because we knew exactly what pots were coming in our shipping, and then we just bought other size ones to use in the interim, and it wasn't like a major inconvenience not to have loads of pots or not to have the specific pots until ours arrived. And some of the pots we actually ended up thrifting, and then some we bought new, but now we have the perfect size pot collection for what we would want, and it was completely fine to go 5 months not having those specific pots. Also, almost 2 of those months were spent in an Airbnb. A weird one though that I was not willing to go without and wait until our shipping had arrived is our cutting boards. We have bamboo cutting boards that kind of look like plastic cutting boards, but they're not plastic, and they just work so well, and they're very lightweight and they're just really nice. I looked before the time. So there were quite a few things I did this with where I'd look, can I easily buy that in Canada and what does it cost? Like for example, I had stainless steel measuring cups in South Africa that I really liked, and I saw I can buy the exact ones on Amazon. But that was not the case with our cutting boards. If I searched bamboo cutting boards, it all came like big chunky wooden cutting boards, and that wasn't what I was looking for. So our cutting boards went into our suitcases and they flew with us, and I don't regret that at all. We use them all the time. We use them like on day 1 of landing here. And then the final example, which was a little bit difficult to go without, or it was a little bit more irritating than I guess the pots, was my sister had gifted us 2 Le Creuset salt and pepper grinders, and I put them in shipping. In hindsight, I probably would have wanted to put them in my bag rather, because to go 5 months without your salt and pepper grinder is quite like a long time. So we ended up just using the glass thing that the salt comes with, and that it works fine. But yeah, I was really excited to unpack that. Okay, so one of the questions that I said that I ask myself all the time is, can I get this thing in Canada? Can I easily get it in Canada? One of the big things that took up a bulk of our shipping, that probably was the main reason why I even looked into shipping, is I'm an employment relations consultant. I provide services to South African clients. I have loads of employment relations and labor law related books, like a lot. And those are not things that I would be able to find here in Canada. I would be able to find labor relations books around the Canadian environment, and I'm excited to look into that when I have the energy and space for that, but not about the South African environment. So those books, I was quite adamant that should the quote be appropriate, I want to ship that. And I did ship that. And the reason I ship those books, where other people might say, why would you ship South African related books to Canada, is that I provide services remotely. So I'm in the process of building online courses. I write blog pieces. I use the information from those books in the work that I do while being here. And I knew and know that there is still a few years at least that I want to focus on compiling a lot of things related to the South African employment relationship. And I'd want my books for that. I also shipped employment relations study notes. Those are the only study notes that I shipped of all of my years of studying. And I know that Ian also shipped some actuarial notes, but not all of his because he could get his in digital format. So he didn't necessarily need the hard copies, where some of mine I would not be able to get in digital format, and therefore I shipped the hard copies. The consideration if you do something like that, the space it takes to ship a bunch of books. So for a while, our books did remain in boxes after our shipping had arrived, because like I said, they arrived 2 weeks after we had a baby. So we were a little bit busy. We didn't run out of buy bookshelves. My shipping books were only unpacked when I purchased the bookshelf for my office, and most of our other books were only unpacked when we purchased this for our lounge. And I'm pretty sure that a lot of Ian's books are still in the box because we haven't purchased a bookshelf for his office just yet. So I would say if you are of a particular profession where you have resources that are important to your profession, then it might be worth considering to ship them. Also, we're big readers. So a lot of the books that are on this bookshelf here behind me, we can most definitely find in Canada. They're the type of non-fiction books that are pretty easy to find. Some of them are gifts, so they're a little bit more sentimental, but for the most part, they weren't gifts, they were just books that we purchased. If those were the only books we had and I didn't have the professional books, maybe I wouldn't have shipped them, but given that we were doing shipping and it didn't cost that much more to add like another box or two for books, I felt that I did want to ship all of these books. And then the other thing with books that we did end up shipping is Afrikaans books, which are not impossible to buy in Canada, but they're very difficult and you're very limited for choice. So for Elba, we did buy children's books in Afrikaans and we shipped those books. I actually wish that I had shipped more books, not just Afrikaans books, but books about South Africa, because being here now, I realize that would have been really nice. So I do have an Afrikaans book about Africa, but I think I would have, for her, wanted a couple more about just the general South African culture and people and places and things. So next time I go to South Africa, I will purchase that. But the reason I'm saying it would have been nice to ship is books are heavy. So they're not that great when you have to fly them. In our suitcases, Ian and I limited the number of books that we flew with us, and I limited mine to the 5 that I really thought that I would use most often. So with our books, there was a practical element, like my profession, but then there was also a sentimental element. I said some of our books were gifts, so they are sentimental, but also, some of the books that we shipped aren't typical reading books. They are things like journals and notepads, and in my case, a whole lot of family albums. Family albums are heavy. And yes, I could have digitized that when I was in South Africa, but we didn't have all that much time, and it's surprisingly expensive to digitize photo albums. So I did ship all of my baby albums and any other family albums that were in my possession. I also have a gran who is a philatelist, so I shipped stamp collections. They're pretty much heavy books with stamps in. Moving on to other sentimental things. And here we can get a bit carried away if you don't check yourself or check your partner if you're flying with somebody else, to really say like, okay, fine, you're saying that's sentimental, but is it going to clutter our house, or is it going to add value to our house? Is it really that important for you to have this item in our home? Because you can say pretty much anything is sentiment. So with the sentimental items, Ian and I would often like keep each other in check. Like do we really have to ship that particular item? And in our future home, like, where is that going to go? Like, realistically, do you use it? Do you like to look at it? All of that. The first one I've already spoken about, the paintings. I have no regrets having the paintings here. As you can see, they're still in their roller stuff. And it's just purely because I haven't gotten around to having them put back onto their frames. But I did ship a smaller art as well in our books. And that's already been put up in our house, or it's being displayed elsewhere. And it is really nice for me to have that. So I'm very excited for when I can put those paintings up. The other reason I haven't rushed out to put them onto their frames is I haven't quite decided where in our house do I want them to go. So I had a friend, we have loads of friends who emigrated, and I asked them tips around like, what did you ship or what do you wish you'd shipped? And somebody said, you know, those homey items that it doesn't seem like it matters. Like even if you purchase them from like Mr. Price Home, like they weren't a gift, they aren't like weirdly expensive or anything, but they kind of give a really home feeling for you. It's sometimes nice to have that when you're in a foreign country. Luckily for me, those items coincided with being gifts from people. So the paintings is one of those. When I see those paintings, they've moved from house to house with me. So they create a really like homey feel for me, and they remind me of the person who painted them. In my case, my aunt painted the two and then a friend painted the other one. So I didn't ship all of the art that was in my house. I picked the ones that were the most sentimental to me. But then the other thing that I shipped was, I have a cousin who is an interior designer. So I shipped, I'm gonna sit on them, scatter pillows from South Africa. I have a lot more than just these two, because they were sentimental to me and they give that nice homey feel when they're on your couch. So these ones I could have, if I needed space in our boxes, taken the cover and just shipped the cover and then sourced cushions that are this size, but it just felt easier because I like that wouldn't be that easy. I don't know. I thought it would be difficult to find the perfect size cushion, and it wasn't that much space to vacuum seal them up. They go quite small, and then to ship them vacuum sealed with the cushion. I know that's not great for cushions to do that, but ours were covered just. And then I also shipped a couple of ornaments, and this one I will really caution people, like, check yourself, because ornaments, hey, can so easily just clutter your home. And then you have these like weird ornaments and you're like, where must I put this? Especially now in Canada, given that we clean our own homes. And my experience here is that things can get pretty dusty pretty easily. So if you have a shelf full of ornaments, it's just gonna get dusty and you're gonna have to clean that. So you really wanna ask yourself, like, do I like that ornament thing that I'm shipping, and do I want to display it? Where do I want to display it in my home? And just decide if it's worth shipping that thing. I did ship little ornaments, and they're mostly displayed on this thing that you see here behind me. One of the kind of homey things that I ship because it fit in shipping and it's meaningful to me is I have a small Persian mat that I could roll up and it fit in the large box. And I've had this since I lived in Dubai with my mom. I'm not regretful that I shipped it, but it just hasn't found a nice spot in our home yet. So it's still just rolled up, and I've kind of tried it in different places and not really found a spot for it just yet. But it easily fit in the boxes. So I am okay that I shipped it, but I'm realizing like you do need to think long and hard about certain items that you ship and whether you're going to use them in your house, or even if they don't fit perfectly in your house, is it something that you want to have long term? All right, moving away from the sentimental, there's something weird we shipped. I don't know why we shipped it, but we for some reason shipped a whole bunch of bags, like tog bags, exercise bags, tote bags. I'm not sure if we just needed to like fill a box. I don't remember what the thinking was behind that. Sure, they are practical to have, but I mean, they're also very easy to get in any country. So for whatever reason, we shipped a bunch of bags. We don't even use bags that often. So that's a bit of a weird one. I think anybody who ships stuff, when you unpack it, will have one or two items where you're like, why did I ship this? So for us, it's bags. Or at least for me. Maybe my husband has a good reason why he shipped bags. And then one that was a waste, but thankfully it's such a small item that it doesn't matter, is I'm super nerdy and I love books and stationery. So no regrets about shipping my books. And then I shipped a whole bunch of stationery that I like to use for like organizing things, sticky notes and so forth. And I shipped folders and also the sleeves that go in that because I have a lot. Not realizing that Canada has a different size paper and that none of the filing I do here uses those type of sleeves. So I have a bunch of sleeves that are A4 and Canada's paper is not the A4. So those I'll just be giving to my mom or somebody else when they come that they can use for South African size paper. And then onto the final criteria, which is hobbies. I know another couple who has a lot of hobbies that require a lot of equipment and gear and things, and they decided to do a move cube. On that note, let me say this. If you're moving inland, you really need to consider what type of shipping you're going to do. Boxes was fine, it was easy, but a container is not easy if you're moving inland. So for us here in Calgary, you gotta check, can I get the container or the move cube or the boxes to me, given that it's being shipped and then has to be transported via land or sky to get to you. Okay, back to hobbies. So I like arts and craft type things. And I had a lot of painting supplies. I really cut down my painting supplies. I was not going to ship a bunch of paint again, given that that paint had come with me from Dubai. I'm also sure like my stuff from Dubai was flown, so it's a bit different, but I don't actually think you can ship. I didn't check because I didn't bother shipping it. I only kept my most used paint brushes or painting things that I know that I use a lot and that are on the pricier end to replace, and they aren't that big, so they're not going to take up that much space in a box. Part of what I use for my random arts and crafts, like I said, I have a gran who's a philatelist, and she gives me stamps that are of little value, and I do random arts and crafts with those stamps. So I shipped a bunch of arts and crafts stamps for when I again want to play around with doing things with them. Ian has musical hobbies, but it didn't seem worth it to ship his guitar. He wasn't emotionally attached to it, and it wasn't such an expensive one that it is like worth flying with you. So we sold his guitar with the intention that when he wants to play one, we can buy a new one. He's actually going to go and buy a ukulele today so he can play a ukulele with Alba. But we did want to ship his saxophone, which is a very expensive item and one that he's had for a really long time. Unfortunately, his saxophone did not fit in the box, so therefore we couldn't ship it, and my mom took it actually from South Africa to Spain and then brought it from Spain to us here in Canada. Another hobby of Ian's that he did ship here behind me is a wooden chessboard that was gifted to him for one of his birthdays. One of his hobbies is chess, so we shipped his chessboard. He didn't want to be without a chessboard until our shipping came, so we did buy like I think a $5 chessboard at the thrift store like a week after we arrived here. And then Ian's other hobby is exercise stuff, so he got rid of, because most of that stuff is really big and just not worth it for us to ship. But some of the more smaller unique items that were quite difficult for him to source in South Africa, we did ship those. And that's it in terms of hobbies. So if you have loads of hobbies, you have to look at whether can you get what you want in Canada, what's it going to cost to get it versus ship it, can you stay without it until your shipping comes, and if it's like huge bulky stuff and you've got like hobbies that require big equipment, maybe you need to go more container move cube vibe versus the boxes that we did. So as I said at the beginning of the video, the total amount that we ended up paying for our shipping was 26,058 Rand and 90 cents. And then you need to add the $784.90 that we had to pay when our shipping arrived here to get the total amount that we paid for our shipping to go from Somerset West in the Western Cape via ship that went to Hong Kong and then to Canada and then bring our stuff to Calgary. A random thing about shipping, especially if this is relevant, I think, to people who emigrate who don't know where you're going to be, you can change the address. I think so long as it's still in like the same city or the same province or whatever, it's okay. For us, it was in the same city. We used a friend's address when we didn't know where we were going to stay. And then once we got our house, I phoned 7 Seas and I just changed the delivery address to our house and then it was delivered. And that is all for today's video. If you've got other questions about our immigration process, please pop them in the comments below. If you like this video, please like this video. If you like my content, remember to subscribe.